How many of you remember the marshmallow experiment, the study from the early 1970s at Stanford University, led by Walter Mischel, where researchers measured delayed gratification in preschool-age children? These children were invited into a room and asked to choose whether they wanted one marshmallow now or 2 marshmallows once the researcher returned to the room, which happened after about 15 minutes. So what happened? Follow-up studies showed that the children who were able to wait for the larger reward had higher SAT scores and overall better educational and social outcomes. This study measured these children's impulse control, which is a component of emotional regulation. One aspect of impulse control is the ability to sit with discomfort. In this case, the discomfort of temptation, in order to gain something more valuable, more important for yourself. Emotional regulation is a tool that allows us to respond with clarity and a long-term vision in mind to the circumstances in our life, rather than simply react to them. When we respond to our circumstances, we're taking life in stride. When we take life in stride, we're demonstrating resilience. Andrew Schulze, co-author of The Resilience Factor, even goes as far as to say that emotional regulation is the most vital piece of resilience. So what do you do when you're sitting in front of the proverbial marshmallow in your life? How do you tend to handle uncomfortable or unpleasant emotions? In this class, we'll explore how the more comfortable we are being uncomfortable, the greater our emotional resilience. Being able to sit with the discomfort of temptation prevents us from acting on the temptation. Similarly, being able to sit with the discomfort of feelings like fear and sadness lets us hear the messages behind these emotions rather than suppressing them or feeling ashamed for having them. Learning how to take our emotions in stride improves our relationships, our ability to solve problems, and our overall emotional resilience. In this class, we're going to start by exploring what emotions are and their fundamental purpose. Then we'll look at common ways we are socialized to handle our emotions and how that socialization may hinder our emotional resilience. Next, we cover the benefits that come from feeling both positive and negative emotions. We will end this class with some strategies for building our emotional resilience. So, before we jump into the pieces of emotional resilience, let's start with the basics. What exactly is an emotion? Well, there is no agreed-upon definition. We know that scientifically, emotions are neural impulses with a variety of features that prompt us to take some sort of action. They also are crucial to our memory and our ability to learn. But I'm going to guess that for most of us, when we experience an emotion, that isn't the definition that comes to mind. A more relatable definition might be that our emotions are our individual responses to the situations that we experience. Depending upon our emotional resilience, our emotions can either support us or hijack us. Either way, they can completely change the way we experience the world. Even though narrowing down what an emotion actually is has proven to be a difficult task in the science community, for most of us, if someone asks what it feels like to be happy, to be sad, to be scared, we know exactly how it feels. We feel emotions when we interact with each other, when we pet our beloved dog. We can even feel them when we're moved by music or a beautiful sunset. Our emotions depend not only on the situation, but also on culture, language, family, and individual differences. Furthermore, what makes one person feel sad could make another person feel a sense of relief, or what makes one person feel happy could make another person feel scared. Clearly, there's a lot of variety what an emotion is, and who feels what emotion and when. Some of us tend to ignore or suppress our emotions, which prevents them from doing their job. Others of us feel completely overwhelmed by our emotions, living on a roller coaster of emotional ups and downs throughout our lives. As you may have guessed, the sweet spot of emotion management lies somewhere between those two. No matter what emotions we feel, our ability to be aware of, express, and apply our emotions is crucial to our emotional resilience. Let's start by taking a look at our basic or primary emotions. According to neuroscientist and author Antonio Damasio, primary emotions are innate and enable us to act quickly. Think of primary emotions as those that can be observed in an infant. Infants are purely reacting to their environment and have not yet developed the capacity to have a controlled response to their emotions. Just like the definition of the word emotion, there is much debate on how many basic emotions we all possess. Based on their observations for the remote Faroe tribe of Papua New Guinea, psychologists Paul Ekman and Wallace Friesen identified 6 such emotions: sadness, happiness, fear, anger, disgust, and surprise. New research, however, points to there being only 4 basic emotions: sadness, happiness, fear, and anger, finding that surprise shares the same arousal patterns as fear, and that disgust shares the same as anger. Even further, some researchers and clinicians believe that there are only 3 basic emotions: sadness, happiness, and fear, explaining that anger is actually what occurs when we have unprocessed fear or sadness. Anger is oftentimes referred to as a secondary emotion. Secondary emotions are what we feel after having our initial reaction to an experience. They come from our ability to have thoughts or opinions about our circumstances, or about our primary emotions themselves. For example, our fear of getting hurt could result in anger, which we could use to protect ourselves, or the alleviation of our anxiety after giving that presentation at work may result in the secondary feeling of relief. Emotional resilience requires a mastery over both the primary and secondary emotions that we experience. Luckily, a few basic emotional regulation skills can be applied to all emotions, no matter whether they happen instantaneously or have been suppressed inside us for many years. The fundamental purpose of emotions is twofold. The first purpose is to push us to take some sort of action or to learn from our experience, guiding how we choose to respond in similar situations in the future. The second purpose is to help us communicate and interact with others. Our emotional expression is an innate piece of our survival as humans. So why do we put so much effort towards hiding our emotions, both from ourselves and others? Well, part of it has to do with the ways we are socialized to deal with our emotions. So let's turn to the next question of socialization. And to do this, let's start with a short activity. It's a writing activity, so go ahead and take a moment to grab some writing materials if you'd like. Okay, so first, I want you to pause the lecture and take 20 seconds to write down all of the good emotions you can think of. Ready? Go. Okay, now pause the lecture again and take another 20 seconds to write down all of the bad emotions you can think of. Go. Now, take a look at how you've divided your lists. My guess is that most of you classified emotions that feel pleasant as good and those that feel unpleasant as bad. Am I right? But are there really good emotions and bad emotions? There are certainly emotions that are comfortable to feel and uncomfortable to feel. But are the uncomfortable emotions themselves actually bad? How do you tend to handle other things in your life that you consider to be bad? Perhaps smoking, harming others, or anything else you consider to be bad. Do you tend to partake in these activities, or do you avoid them? If you partake in them, do you tend to feel guilt or shame about doing so? Typically, we avoid things we consider to be bad and welcome things we consider to be good. So, coming back to emotions, which emotions are bad? The truth is, there aren't any bad emotions. We are socialized to believe that emotions are good and bad, but in reality, they are all good because they all help us navigate our experiences. Here's how that socialization happens. We live in a culture that often seems to value happiness over honoring the full spectrum of life's experiences. Do you make an effort not to cry in front of others? How many of you smile and say, "I'm fine," even when you're going through something really difficult? We seem to have a chronic problem in the society of shielding our truth for the sake of keeping a happy front. And that is not to say we shouldn't strive to see the positive in life. As we see, and we'll see in a few minutes, there are many benefits to feeling gratitude and pleasant or positive emotions. The important part here is that we don't want to suppress our actual emotions for the sake of coming across as if everything is fine to those in our lives, but most importantly, to ourselves. Two emotions that we tend to have the most difficult time honoring are fear and sadness. Have you ever heard the words, "Don't cry after you started crying"? Have you ever said those words to someone you care about? Or tried to stifle their cries because in some way you felt uncomfortable or had to do something? When we say things like "don't cry," our goal is usually to make someone feel better. But what message do these words really send? Probably something along the lines of, "Crying is not okay. Crying is a sign of weakness. Your crying makes me uncomfortable." Let's look at an example through the eyes of a child. When my son Santiago was a toddler, we went to the playground every day. At least once a week, he would get a scraped knee, bump his head, or take a sudden plummet off of the monkey bars that left him not hurt, but a little startled. Over time, I watched how my response to his injuries changed the way he experienced them. Most of the time, the injuries were little 60-second hurt moments that are a normal part of a young person learning how to maneuver their growing body in the interesting terrain of a playground with lots of different obstacles to navigate. I noticed how, in the beginning, how my previous socialization was to give him a little hug and say things like, "You're okay, shake it off." And this is a really typical response intended to comfort the child and let him know that he will be okay. But when you really break down these words, what message is being shared with the child? The message is that there is conflict between how he actually feels and how he is being told to feel. Being told you're okay during times of distress invalidates the emotions we're feeling while distressed. It also teaches him to look for how other people respond to the situation to assess how he is feeling. When this message is reinforced to us time and time again through words like, "You're okay," "You'll be fine," "Don't cry," "Don't be scared," it makes sense that over time we start to either suppress those emotions or to become overwhelmed by them, as though we shouldn't be feeling them in the first place. Also, when we come with parental superhero solutions like "Mommy will fix it," we breed codependency instead of compassionate independence. Over time, I would always still give him a hug, but instead of saying things like "shake it off," I would ask questions like, "How are you feeling? What did it feel like when you fell? What do you need right now? Can you handle that, or is there something I can do to help?" Eventually, what I would ask, "Does it feel like we need to go home to take care of this, or would you like to play with your friends for a while longer on the playground?" At which point, he all but once went off running back to play some more. What I was trying to share with him was that he had the answers inside of himself. It is a problem-solving paradigm that includes giving him more opportunities to explore how he was feeling and to find the answers of what he needed inside of himself. He knew I was there for backup and love always, but also that his emotions were valid and that he could evaluate the situation and come up with a good solution for himself. So many of us are walking around with buried emotions we aren't even aware of, or feeling overwhelmed by the emotions we're ashamed to have. This results in a lot of unprocessed pain being carried around, and if we're carrying that unprocessed pain around with us, we're not moving through it. Remember, emotional regulation and resilience does not mean we suppress our emotions. It means we accept them and listen to the messages they have to give us. Sometimes just asking ourselves the question, what is present? What does that feel like in my body? Is there an action this experience is calling me to take in the world? Sometimes just asking these questions can transform an experience. When emotions are studied, they are often called positive and negative emotions. Positive emotions being the ones that are pleasant to feel, like happiness, and negative emotions being those that are unpleasant to feel, like sadness. It probably comes as no surprise that there are benefits to feeling positive emotions. But did you know that there are actual benefits to feeling negative emotions as well? Let's take a closer look at this. Positive feelings such as happiness and joy predict increases in our resilience and life satisfaction. According to Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build theory, positive emotions encourage new thoughts and actions that help us build internal resources, improve our psychological flexibility, and create better relationships. According to this theory, emotions like happiness, interest, and anticipation encourage better health, wellness, and wealth, not because the emotions themselves are pleasurable, but because they help create the tools and resources that help us reach our goals. There is probably no surprise that emotions that inherently feel good have positive benefits. But that doesn't mean that so-called negative emotions don't have some positive benefits of their own. Emotions like sadness and fear prepare the body to deal with real or perceived danger by sharpening our memory and helping us focus, which can improve our ability to analyze and act in situations. Even more interesting is that negative emotions do not interfere with the benefits of positive emotions. Did you get that? Negative emotions do not interfere with the benefits of positive emotions. Studies on resilience report that all people, no matter how resilient they are, tend to experience negative emotions with similar frequencies. The only difference between the two groups is that more resilient people experience more frequent or higher levels of positive emotions than people who are measurably less resilient. Positive emotions serve as a protection mechanism against the adversities of life. No matter how strong our fear, sadness, and other negative emotions become. So, since positive emotions foster resilience and negative emotions do not detract from it, we have no reason to hide or suppress these emotions. In fact, it's better to address them and learn from their message than it is to keep them pressed down or to let them control us. Let's take a look at how we can do that. In his book, The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk states, neuroscience research shows that the only way we can change the way we feel is by becoming aware of our inner experience and learning to befriend what is going on inside ourselves. So how do we do this? How do we befriend our inner experience to improve our resilience? The key to this is normalizing our emotions and our relationship with them, which we can do by practicing emotional regulation. Emotional regulation means we are fully aware and in charge of our emotions. Sometimes being in charge of our emotions is misdefined as not showing our emotions. But this is so far from the truth. The more we suppress our emotions, the more they're bound to burst out, either as anger or in their original form. Emotional regulation is like sitting on a boat in the ocean, riding out the waves as they come and go. Today we're going to talk about 3 components of emotional regulation that can help us improve our resilience: naming feelings, coping skills, and mindfulness. In the book, The Whole Brain Child, Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson offer brain-based parenting strategies. You might notice that a lot of these strategies for emotional regulation and resilience are geared towards children, but even adults can benefit from these exact same skills. Most adults need them too, because most of us never learned them as children. How many times have you ever reacted to something emotionally in the moment, only to reflect back on it once you've calmed down and thought, "Oh, I wish I hadn't done that"? One of the first strategies in The Whole Brain Child is you need to name it to tame it. In other words, in order to control your emotions, you need to know what it is you're trying to control in the first place. The more we practice naming our emotions, both during emotional moments and after, the better we are able to regulate our emotional experiences. There are even tools designed to help us with this. The Feeling Wheel is a tool developed by Dr. Gloria Wilcox to help us name what we're feeling and find the root emotion behind how we're feeling. You can simply use the wheel to help you name the various emotions you're feeling, or you can use it to trace those emotions back to the center of the circle to help you simplify your emotional experience by bringing it more and more into a basic emotion. Another way to practice naming feelings is to dig a little bit into feelings of anger. As I mentioned earlier, anger is often a secondary emotion that is covering up feelings of sadness or fear. Think about a time when you felt angry in the past, or maybe you're angry about something right now. Look beneath the surface a little and see whether you're actually experiencing feelings of sadness or fear that are being masked by anger. This trick can work wonders on our communication with others. There's a huge difference between yelling at your partner for being home an hour later than expected and saying, "I was really scared because I thought something might have happened to you," or "I feel sad that you didn't tell me you were going to be late because we've talked about this before." Let's take an example that many of us can relate to: road rage. Some of us find it gratifying to vent anger on the cars we share the road with. But where does that anger originate from? A fear of being late to a meeting? A fear of being hurt on the road? Or perhaps you're feeling sad about something else in your life, which is then taken out on the car in front of you. Sometimes we aren't even aware of the emotions that lie underneath our anger because we've been conditioned to think that they're not favorable or even okay to have. But learning how to accept, name, and dig into these emotions is crucial for our emotional resilience. When we struggle with our emotions, it can lead us to engage in behaviors that harm ourselves or others. Managing our emotions can be hard, especially when it is a new skill that we're working on. This is why coping skills are so crucial to developing emotional regulation. One simple but very effective coping skill is just to normalize the experience of having emotions. No matter what you're feeling, tell yourself, "It's okay that I feel this way." Emotions are always okay. It's the behaviors that follow the emotions that are sometimes not okay. Telling yourself, "It's okay that I feel sad," allows the feeling just to exist. It reminds you that even though I might not be comfortable, I am allowed to feel the way that I do. Another quick and easy coping skill is to take 3 deep breaths when you're feeling overwhelmed. Doing this has the potential to quickly lower your heart rate, which will encourage relaxation and feelings of calm. Breathing is so important. We have a whole practice class devoted to it in this course. There are so many different coping skills, some of which will work better for you than others. Some people like to take a walk or do yoga, write out how they're feeling, dance, clean, take a bath, paint. The list goes on and on. You may have noticed that these coping mechanisms involve some sort of physical outlet, either through gross motor movements or fine motor movements. Learning to observe where you feel your emotions in your body and giving them an outlet deepens your mind-body connection, which increases your emotional regulation and resilience. We all can find what works for us. The important thing is to make sure your coping skills are healthy, meaning they don't hurt you or someone else. It is also important to recognize that these coping mechanisms don't work by distracting us from our emotional experiences. Effective coping mechanisms are actually supporting us in processing these emotions throughout our body and mind. A useful coping mechanism will help you navigate your way through a challenging emotion, helping the emotion tell its tale and share what it has to share. Recently, over the course of 3 months, I had 3 friends get diagnosed with cancer, 2 of whom are moms with small children. A deep feeling of sadness arose. It was the strongest sense of sadness I had felt in a long time. Then one evening, I went to see the cellist Yo-Yo Ma and the Silk Road Ensemble play in concert. When they began the concert, Yo-Yo Ma shared a story about how there was so much sadness in the world right now, from war to family conflict to damaging the environment. He said that sadness is a universal emotion and the one that can unite us in many ways. He hoped that the concert would help share many different sides of the feeling of sadness being felt individually and collectively. He mentioned that music has a unique ability to bridge cultures and help us find the human qualities we all share. When I heard that, my first response was disappointment. Part of me was hoping for an inspiring concert to shift me out of the cloud of sadness I'd been feeling. However, as the concert unfolded, it felt like the music gave many unique expressions to the sadness I was experiencing. It helped me feel the full symphony of the experience of sadness. When I left the concert hall, the sadness felt alive, like it had all these different flavors and textures that I wasn't even aware of before the concert. I wasn't just sad about my 3 friends. Sadness had been building for a long time about a lot of topics. The experience of my friends just brought it to the surface. I felt like the music helped sadness tell its tale. In the days that followed, I noticed how my sadness had transformed into a deep feeling of connection with others, both the people in my life, as well as the sadness of people I walked past on the street or saw in the news. The sadness was also there helping me see what I valued most in life, as well as how precious this human life really is. Sometimes we don't realize what we value until we're afraid we might lose it. In the days that followed, sadness was still present, but it was there amongst a whole collection of incredible insights and wisdom that was awakened from the deep experience of sadness. This example also illustrated 2 of the main points we discover in the practice of mindfulness. There are 2 main ways that emotions are brought to our attention. The first is that they are so strong we can't help but notice them. And the second way is we use introspection to pay attention to what is going on beneath our surface. Practicing introspection is so important when it comes to resilience, because we can't work with the emotions we have if we don't even know what's there in the first place, right? The ability to be mindful is one and the same with our ability to be emotionally resilient. Mindfulness is the ability to observe and experience emotions in the present moment without judgment. Think about how many sensations there are for us to observe around us all the time. There are thousands. Take wherever you are right now. Perhaps you can notice the weight of the shirt on your shoulders, or a sensation of coolness on your forehead. There are so many ways to practice mindfulness that we're going to devote a whole class to this concept, which will give you a basic strategy for applying mindfulness in your own life. All of these strategies provide a foundation for increasing our emotional regulation, boosting our ability to bounce back from adverse circumstances. Mindfulness strategies are also important in building mental resilience, which you can explore in our class on mindfulness in the practice class. Before that, though, take some time to consider which pieces from this class speak the most to you, and let that guide you as you work to master your emotions and bring your emotional resilience to life.